There's a chemical in the water in thousands of households across central Oklahoma. It's odorless, tasteless, but potentially toxic. And only now are scientists really learning about its potential to cause health problems if you drink it.
If one thing in particular defined me in high school, it was track. I loved to run. It was my release.
For Amy Jarvis, running was how she dealt with life. But shortly after graduating from Noble High School, life threw something at her she couldn't run from.
They told me that I had bone cancer.
Osteosarcoma. Only about 800 people a year get it in the U.S.
The night before I went and had the surgery done for my leg, I ran a mile.
Amy thought she was just unlucky until she found out that same rare cancer had hit again and again in Noble.
A friend of mine that I went to school with, Carrie, she called me. I remember that phone call, and she tells me that she has been diagnosed with osteosarcoma, and her and I had been roommates just maybe a few years before that.
Soon, reunions of Noble's class of 1988 became full of stories of people in the small town who had cancer.
Why are so many being diagnosed? And then it all came back to, well, remember when we were in high school and they told us about the water.
Noble's water currently meets all health standards, but it's drawn almost exclusively from the Garber-Wellington Aquifer, an underground water source that is spread beneath much of central Oklahoma and known to be high in heavy metals. A review of thousands of pages of water records from Noble revealed this document, created in the mid-'80s, showing the town had to shut down water wells due to unsafe levels of naturally occurring uranium. But beyond uranium, the aquifer is also rich in other metallic elements like arsenic, selenium, and chromium.
Hexavalent chromium can be very harmful.
So it kills people.
Oh, yeah.
Many people remember chromium because of Hollywood. The story of Aaron Brockovich in Hinckley, California, a town polluted by a form of chromium known as chromium-6 or hexavalent chromium. Just after dark in Hinckley wasn't always such a lonely time. But then the contamination happened, people started to die, others moved away. The school closed not long ago, and the rest of the town is slowly starting to disappear. Fox 25 traveled to San Francisco to meet with Renee Sharp, Research Director for the Environmental Working Group, or EWG.
There is a lot of hexchrome around the country, and Oklahoma seems to have some of the highest levels.
After an EWG study citing chromium contamination in central Oklahoma, Noble did testing. We found the result in city water records showing Noble water with 12.1 parts per billion of hexchrome. The state of California set a public health goal for hexavalent chromium at 0.02 parts per billion. Now that goal is, if cost were no object, the best case scenario. Now consider this though, in Oklahoma, some of the hexavalent chromium levels are nearly 600 times the California public health goal.
At this point, we don't really have a concrete health effects data.
The Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality says the state's research is limited.
We have not seen anything from the health department that indicates an illness cluster related to any waterborne issue.
The state health numbers on cancer rates in Cleveland County, the area with the highest concentrations of metals, are not out of step with national rates. But those numbers don't include bone cancers. Other research, including a report by the EPA, shows chromium can collect in bones. Some reports link it directly to bone cancer, like Amy's. And even though California says hexchrome is dangerous, Oklahoma says it simply can't do the same research.
We don't have the manpower to do it, we don't have the research facilities to do it, and we certainly don't have the millions and millions of dollars that it takes to do a study like that.
While the scientists, advocates, and political leaders all work to find a solution, the fact remains there is something in the water in Noble, and more research points to the fact it may not be safe.
We're in the 21st century, and we're still drinking water that could be, poisoning our children. Poisoning our elders. It doesn't make sense to me.
Now, this investigation is by no means a complete look at the issues surrounding drinking water or chromium. Tomorrow night, we're going to be exploring more of these issues in depth during a half-hour special report. For more than half a century, Intercity Violin has been a sanctuary of sorts.
This is Intercity. violin. It's actually my permanent mailing address.
Kyle Dillingham first found this shop as a boy on a trip to the city.
The shop itself has been here for 58 years, Dina? 58 years.
He ended up going to college just down the street at Oklahoma City University, but inner city became his home away from home.
Lots of history, lots and lots of kids have been furnished instruments, had opportunities to have instruments and be able to make music.
Kyle knows every inch of the store, from the rental room where musicians in the making meet their very first instrument,
Just watch your head.
all the way down to the repair shop.
There's plenty of things in progress here.
Whether it's been loved on too much or not loved enough, this is where the broken and battered end up.
Seeing a broken violin is nothing for me. They're all, they're all over the place. For example, this is a pretty bad break.
But sometimes a bad break is just that.
The repair cost is greater than the replacement value, at which point it's not worth repairing, so you toss it aside.
Tossed aside and abandoned until one day after Kyle returned from a trip that took him to an orphanage in Africa.
What I discovered changed my life forever.
It was inside the old home that serves as storage for inner city.
I'd seen them before, but this was different.
The place those instruments deemed broken beyond repair went to be forgotten.
Just to sort of give you an example, I'll just take one here.
Something inside him said, play. And one by one, no matter how broken, each violin shared its story.
That's what these violins have been teaching me, was just one at a time. Just figure out their strengths, figure out where the value is and where the beauty is.
Beauty no one ever imagined coming from what had been deemed just a pile of junk.
Never. But if anybody could make something of beauty, Kyle can.
Dina Deitch's father founded Inner City, and when she heard music coming from those broken pieces, she saw a chance to change lives.
They're always broken. They have no hope. They're down on themselves, the guilt, all of this stuff, but still they're so worthy. But it's very hard to get it through to them.
Dina said, Kyle, get your box of broken violins, let's go. We're going to go to this First Step fundraising lunch.
When they see this instrument here, and it's broken, and it doesn't even have a scroll, and yet he can make music on it, it does something. It lets them see in a way that no matter how broken you are, you have a gift to give.
Our Father,
It is through brokenness that these instruments inspire.
which art in heaven. If we share anything in common with our fellow humankind, it is brokenness.
Showing those caught in any sort of addiction, recovery, or rehab that all it takes is a willingness to look closer and not look past the flaws, but look through them to find the music and the beauty inside.
Oh Lord my God. It's tempting to want to bring them down to the shop and fix them, but then what I've been discovering with these instruments is to fix them would be to lose that which is really innately beautiful about them.
Kyle Dillingham is working on finishing up a CD with music made from his broken violins. He still performs with fully functioning instruments, but says he will never look at anything broken the same way again. Nearly every state agency took a cut during this year's budget negotiations at the Capitol, but the DEQ took one of the largest, $12 million, that's 21%. Acting on tips from multiple sources, we looked into the personal relationships those sources say may have played a role.
I'm not talking about anything outside that says legislators only, but you just broke the law.
We didn't break the law because we didn't follow Representative Don Arms as he walked into a private part of the Capitol after refusing to answer questions about a cache of open records we received from the Department of Environmental Quality. Off-camera, Arms was more than willing to talk about the budget numbers and point out how he believes the $12 million cut wasn't a serious issue for the agency. He also told us that all of his DEQ budget dealings happened at the Capitol among his staff. But emails and text messages uncovered by Fox 25 show Representative Arms had a personal relationship with at least 2 different high-ranking DEQ employees. Those records show the 3 met at his personal residence known as the Blue House to discuss DEQ business. This message from Arms says, "Kay, why don't we order something and meet at the Blue House so we aren't seen or overheard?" This year, both of those women were terminated by the DEQ before the DEQ's budget was finalized. This email from one of the women shows her giving Arms tips on how to grill her boss, DEQ Director Scott Thompson, during this year's budget hearings. The woman writes, "When Scott starts talking, no matter what he sounds like, you should ask him to speak up. That will totally knock him off kilter if he isn't there already." Beyond professional meetings, text messages show Arms also invited one of the women over for parties and other encounters. In this message, Arms says, "Burgers are almost ready, fixin' to get tired of waiting." The woman replies, "Aw, what time is your bedtime?" Arms answers, "As soon as you get here." Arms denies he held any personal vendetta against the DEQ and made it clear he wouldn't answer our questions about his conduct or personal contact with any DEQ employees, even sending a Capitol Guard out to drive his car away. Are you getting Representative Arms' car for him? I got no comment. In Spencer's Kreenling Park, just behind the rodeo grounds, is a creek. And on July 1st of last year, a pipeline company told the state an abandoned line was leaking, pouring old oil into a narrow stream that feeds into the North Canadian River. Spencer City Councilwoman Tony Kennedy says even though the spill started on city property, it was neighbors who first notified the town.
Nobody picked up the phone except for the landowners that it affected.
According to documents from the Oklahoma Corporation Commission, pipeline owner DCP Midstream self-reported the spill to the National Emergency Response, saying one of its old lines that ran over the creek leaked about 1 barrel of oil. The July 1st report indicates they promised to have the creek clean by July 15th of 2013. DCP made the first move to clean it up, but the landowners claim that first effort failed.
It should be nice, clean water to water the cattle and fertilize the hay and the blackberries in the area.
Kennedy is speaking on behalf of the landowners that farm next to this creek.
I couldn't, in good conscience, put cattle on here right now.
The issue is that just slight movement in the water creates a glossy sheen. The landowners allege it's residual oil being stirred up. This is what's left more than a year after the original spill and more than 8 months after the last cleanup effort. According to state records, the spill was reported as 1 barrel of oil, but the cleanup only recovered half a barrel. Kennedy says even as an elected official, she's not having much luck getting the landowners the help they want.
Every agency that's been contacted has wanted to say that it's not serious enough or it's not in their ballpark as a problem.
Spill was cleaned up to our satisfaction, and as far as we could tell, it was in compliance with the rules.
Tim Baker with the Corporation Commission says they do supervise any environmental cleanups resulting from pipeline spills. But after declaring the cleanup complete on July 10th, documents from the OCC show a new complaint on July 16th revealed there was still an oil skim on the water. The OCC complaint says investigators declared the cleanup completed again on August 19th. But on December 17th, the landowners complained again, and an investigator with the Oklahoma Corporation Commission confirmed a sheen on the water coming from something bubbling to the surface. The report says it was apparently related to the previous spill.
We revisited the site. We did not see any visible evidence of any residual oil, and we were satisfied they had cleaned up the residual material to our satisfaction.
DCP promised to cut the pipeline and remove the section that went over the creek. Again, on January 17th of this year, the OCC investigator said the cleanup was complete. But 8 months later, when we visited, the landowner helped us dig this dirt from the bottom of the creek. It smelled like old oil and felt greasy, leaving black stains on anything it touched. The OCC says testing results provided by DCP show the soil and water isn't contaminated.
All the samples that have been taken so far do not show there's a problem out there. Our visual inspection doesn't show there's a problem out there, but we're willing to come out and resample.
Baker says plant life or decaying vegetation could be responsible for the sheen and maybe the smell. The landowner provided us reports from multiple labs that he says prove his creek and land are still polluted. The last samples were collected in June of this year.
There's absolutely a problem. And I think to each of those people that have come out here and said it's not that big of a problem, we haven't seen anybody take a drink or take a bottle of water out of there themselves.
Now, we called the company responsible for the pipeline, DCP Midstream, but no one with the company returned our calls for comment on this story. Now, the landowners say after Fox 25 started looking into this, the Corporation Commission made a new offer to come look at their concerns.